What's an NSFW scandal in your family? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. My great-grandmother left my great-grandfather after they had 2 kids because she didn't like being a mom. While she was gone, she literally started working in a whorehouse. A little under 2 years after she left, she came back and dropped off a kid for my great-grandfather to take care of. 6 years after that, she came back, took my great-aunt, and gave her to her biological father. I believe a year after that, she came back and decided she was ready to be a mother to my grandmother and great-aunt. My great-grandfather and her were together for the rest of their lives. He took care of her when she was deathly ill to the day she died over 40 years later. My second great-aunt tracked down my great-grandfather in her early 20s and short-lived the rest of her life like she had 2 fathers. Needless to say that family gatherings could be tense at times. Story 2. My cousin, at the time in her 20s, married a guy in his 40s who came with an adult kid, a son, 18 at the time, from a previous relationship. My cousin pumped out a couple kids with this man. Couple years pass, my cousin is caught in bed with her husband's adult son, now in his mid-20s, while my cousin is in her 30s. Cousin and husband divorce. Cousin keeps custody of their children. Cousin keeps seeing the adult son of her ex-husband. Couple years pass, and they pump out a few kids. The dude is now a stepfather to his own half-siblings, and his own biological kids are half-siblings to his own half-siblings. We don't talk about my cousin anymore. Story 3. My hyper-religious, super-conservative godfather is a doctor. He worked as a GINO in a public hospital geared towards those in need. He had a child out of wedlock with one of his patients. Apparently, though highly unethical, there was no abuse involved and the mother actually wanted him, and they proceeded to have a whole affair during her doc apps, which became increasingly frequent. The family found out when the child was already in her teens. My godmother was suspicious about a few monthly expenses that seemed to be increasing and decided to investigate, follow the money. He was paying a buttload of child support, shut-up money. She was, of course, devastated. His son-in-law, who saw him as this inspirational alpha father leader, man of God figure, and always wanted to follow his lead, legitimately had a mental breakdown when everyone found out and ended up in a psych ward for 3 months. Story 4. My aunt divorced her husband. When I was young, I was told it's because he cheated on her. A couple years ago, I learned that wasn't the whole truth. My aunt came home one day and found him with her teenage daughter, his stepdaughter, lounging in the bedroom, sharing a joint in nothing but their underwear. Because this all happened before I was born, I didn't even know I had an extra cousin on that side of the family. My aunt actually moved out and left her daughter and ex behind. I was so surprised I didn't even think to ask if or why my aunt didn't try to take her daughter away. The age of consent here is 16, and this happened 30 years ago. So I don't think there was anything my aunt could legally do to her ex even if she wanted to. Story 5. My mother's good friend divorced her husband because he was their teenage daughter. Why she didn't see the clues earlier is beyond me. I didn't really know her at all. That's not the messed up part though. She came home one day to find her daughter on her dad's lap, laughing and cuddling. She was about 19 at the time. She told her mom that they had been having an affair for quite a while, and that her biological dad was her lover/boyfriend. She said they were in love with each other. I can't remember what kind of charges were brought against him, because it was like 20 years ago. I do remember her daughter and husband saying, "Stay out of it." I believe he served jail time. My mom's friend cancer about 10 years ago, and her daughter never talked to her again because she put him in jail and got all the husband's money in the divorce, which was a lot. The whole family was beyond messed up. Story 6. Sometime in the late 90s, my aunt caught my uncle cheating on her with another married woman. They divorced. The other couple divorced. In time, she met the other woman's ex-husband, and a couple years after the divorce, they got married and the other couple got married. Both families had kids, so then the kids would shuffle between the two homes. My old uncle was a POS. The new uncle is a great guy who treats my aunt well. I would definitely say it turned out for the best for her in the end, but I don't know how the kids feel about it. TLDR. My aunt swapped spouses with the woman who slept with her husband. Story 7. My cousin and her husband, in their 50s, got really sick from a mysterious illness. Doctors couldn't diagnose anything, but it looked like liver failure, so they were told to quit drinking, and they did. 5 months later, my cousin died. 1 month later, her husband too. They had kids in their 20s living in the same house. Mother and I went over to collect some bits and offer support. Antifreeze in the kitchen. Funnel and antifreeze in the bathroom, near an empty medicine bottle. My dad and I are certain they their parents. They never even seemed to care that their parents. Since then, they have moved away and don't talk to anyone in the family anymore. Story 8. My cousins. They are 2 brothers who each had long-term girlfriends and each had multiple children. Oldest brother split with his girlfriend and kept custody of his kids. Youngest brother was severely injured and was in hospital for a long time. He self-destructed and left his girlfriend and kids to do dumb. Oldest brother eventually got with his brother's now ex. They are now married with custody of all of their children and have had more kids. They are all happy and doing well, except youngest brother, but their kids are now brother cousins, which is weird. Story 9. Well, I think my family has a doozy. My father has fathered 19 children, including myself, that we know of. This is between 5 different women. It goes like this. First woman, 1 kid second woman, 6 kids third woman, my mom, 6 kids fourth woman, 4 kids fifth woman, 2 kids. The 5th woman he got into a relationship with when she was 15 and he was in his 50s. He groomed her and that woman is a mess. My blind uncle married a 17-year-old and they have 3 kids. A couple months ago, one of my sisters came out to me that my father had her for 5 years, starting when she was 8. And he did this to my 2 other half-sisters too, starting with the youngest one at 4. This sparked an ongoing investigation, and we are currently trying to arrest him. Story 10. One of my great-great-grandfathers was arrested for doing unspeakable things with some sheep. He was arrested for bestiality and went to the local court. The 3 witnesses, railway workers, refused to describe what they saw, women in the room, and he was let go. 2 years later, he was seen drunk at 7 a.m. with 2 sheep on the other side of a flooded creek. A boy saw him pick up the sheep, his girlfriend's, and swam across the creek, but lost his hat. He went back in to get his hat and drowned. I think this story is funny, and my wife does not understand why I have told anyone. The other funny thing is I get really bad rashes from wearing wool. Story 11. Not my family, but a coworker who I worked with years ago. She was married to her stepbrother, which would have been slightly acceptable if they had met as adults, but no, they had been raised as siblings. So that was really weird looking in from the outside. But it gets worse. Her stepbrother/husband ends up getting her pregnant. About 6 months after the baby is born, her stepbro/husband reveals that he's gay and is having an affair with her biological brother, who has also known him since childhood. Her stepbro leaves her for her actual brother, and now she's stuck as a single mother raising her, son/nephew-in-law. Her bio brother is also technically considered her child's stepfather and his uncle. That whole situation is messed, and I can only imagine how awkward Thanksgiving dinners are. Story 12. When I was a kid, my uncle dropped acid or some substance on Christmas Eve. Anyway, he was so messed up that my grandparents wouldn't let him drive home. He was also so messed up that he tried to crawl into my grandfather's bed and stick his finger up his butt. My grandpa ended up falling out of bed and fled downstairs to sleep on the couch. My mother and aunt were laughing so hard for some reason, even though my grandfather was rightfully upset and shocked, of course. That's when we found out my uncle was gay. Legit the next morning, he had no recollection of the event other than the worst hangover of his life. My grandmother forbade the family to ever speak about it again. Story 13. Not sure if it's really NSFW, but I had an uncle. Let's call him Ralph. Now Ralph was married to Alice. They were extremely toxic together. They got drunk and literally got into physical fights with each other. One day, Ralph posts on social media how sad he is that Alice finally left him, yada yada. No surprise there, and often other members of the family would say, "Oh ye, we saw Aunt Alice at the Piggly Wiggly. She's a teacher in another state now." So we all thought that's what happened because there were these constant sightings of Aunt Alice. Fast forward 7-ish years later, and Uncle Ralph is diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. He was a chronic smoker, so no surprise there. They did all they could to save him and finally told him they would be surprised if he survived another month or so. He called a family meeting for a final goodbye, and that's when he admits to everyone, and I mean the whole family was packed into this guy's hospital room, including a 13-year-old stormtrooper named Bob. Anyway, he admits that 7-ish years ago, he Aunt Alice, buried her body in the woods where he liked to hunt, and that was that. He passed the following week. The police did find the remains, and Aunt Alice was put to rest. That's my family scandal in a nutshell. Story 14. My uncle was in love with and sleeping with his first cousin while he, my uncle, was married. During that affair, his wife got pregnant. My uncle didn't want his lover cousin to find out, so he made his wife get an abortion. So his freaking cousin he was having sex with wouldn't know he had still been sleeping with his wife. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. My uncle's wife divorced him, and some people no longer talk to the uncle. I've seen him maybe twice in my life before all that happened. I have no idea what everyone else thought. I was so small when it happened, my dad just said we weren't gonna see that uncle anymore. I'm an adult now and recently asked my dad why no one talks to this uncle, and that's when I found out the above story. Apologies for anything confusing in the original reply of mine. I could barely follow it as I heard it. It just got worse and worse. Edit 2. People wanted to know how this was discovered. My uncle called someone, I don't know if it was my dad or another sibling, crying, "Doesn't want to be with me anymore. I need her. I love her." And whoever he was talking to was like, "Wait, what?" I don't know the specific details, but that's what I know. He called some trusted relative because his first cousin found out he was still sleeping with his wife. She got mad and refused to be with him anymore. He went crazy and spilled the beans. And then the whole family found out. Half the family, including my dad, do not talk to him anymore. The other half do for some reason. Story 15. I had a cousin I used to like. Active in veteran support circles, had been honored at events and baseball and hockey games. Lots of fun, non-judgmental, young veterans, the family's golden boy. Became even more of a hero after being diagnosed with cancer, presumably as a result of the burn pits in Iraq. He earlier this year. 3.5 years ago, his younger brother told me that he had been by him as a teenager. Not only that, but I found out that much of his service in Iraq had been wildly exaggerated, like desk work in a secure area during the relatively peaceful period after Saddam's fall. And a lot of his posturing as a spokesman for veterans was actually him taking credit for the real work being done his younger brother/victim, an Afghanistan vet. The victim's cousin provided proof of all of this in the form of texts and a recorded conversation with his brother in which he pretty much admitted to the whole thing has divided the extended family. My immediate family, my dad's cousin's family, and my uncle, the two brothers' father. and his wife are on the victim's side. And none of us, along with the victim's cousin and his family, were invited to his brother's funeral. The rest of my dad's siblings and their families, they just kind of pretend that this never happened, despite the solid evidence provided to them all. The sad thing is that, for years, the victim cousin was denigrated as a black sheep of the family who messed up and caused drama for no reason, thanks to his brother controlling the narrative and slandering him at every opportunity while holding himself up as a big war hero who never actually saw combat. Dying of cancer was frankly the best outcome for him. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below.